Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. I am really excited about today's show. You know, for the people that watch the show, and we hope you watch it all the time, you know that my wife, Kristen, and I, we're passionate about animals. I mean, we love it. We love to donate to various nonprofits. We're involved. We've got animals. My wife has horses. We have a beautiful dog named Louie. We've traveled throughout the world to actually see animals in their natural environment. And when I had a chance to speak with Azzedine Downes, who is the CEO and president of IFAW, and we're going to get into it. If you haven't heard of IFAW, in the unlikely event you haven't heard of them, they've been around for over 50 years. And of course, they are the International Fund for Animal Welfare. And they're really leading the space in this particular vertical. I mean, if you talk about ivory trade or whales or veterinary care, marine sanctuaries, I mean, penguins, tigers, you name it, they do so much great work. And it's a real honor and a privilege to have Azzedine on the show today. So welcome to the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you, Azzedine. Of course, we think about it. We think about the organization, people in the know, people in the mix, people that understand how important everything animal is, from tigers to Asian elephants to seals to penguins. They know that the IFAW is a true leader in the space. But before we get started, why don't you just pull the lens back to 30,000 feet just a bit? Tell us about IFAW, and then we're going to go.
Sure. So we were founded in 1969 up in Canada, and many people know us from the days when we were working to stop the seal hunt, the baby seals. And today we're working in 40 countries around the world, and we really focus on two pillars, what I describe as rescue and conservation. And what that means is that you can rescue an individual animal, but if they don't have a place to live, they wind up in a sanctuary or a zoo, and that's not what we're about. We're about keeping animals back in their natural habitats.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Of course, I'm an older gentleman. I'm going to tell my age right now, but I remember back in the late 60s in elementary school where we had the old-fashioned reel-to-reel movies where they would bring the projector into the room and they would show us the seal hunt, even as a young person. And you guys were right in the middle of that early on, and here you developed into this international organization. You just had some interesting awards, and you do an award program. Let's talk about that and tell us what that's all about. You just got done with that, and that's a wonderful way to give back to the community.
Sure. So we just finished doing our, I think, 26th Animal Action Awards in London, and we really focus on people who really devote their lives, many times in very dangerous situations, to save animals. And a lot of times, people who love animals, and you mentioned all the animals that you have, the focus is on the animal, which is correct. But the fact of the matter is, it's about the people who rescue and save the lives of animals too. So, the focus there is to really be able to tell their story and to give them a platform to tell the story of why they do what it is that they do, why it is that they devote their lives to do it. And some of it happens in places where there's a lot of support, there's a lot of public support for animals, but in other places, people are really up against, governments that don't agree, cultural issues, religious issues, and animosity towards people who save the lives of animals as opposed to working on human issues. So it was a great event with lots of people from around the world, and we celebrated the life of Roxy Dunkwart, who got Lifetime Achievement Awards for what she does in saving the lives of elephants in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I love it so much. The algorithms have my algorithmic brain already, set up in the social media, because when I go on social, if I go on the various platforms, I always get served up a lot of video of people that are making a difference in the world, a lot of video of people that are changing the dynamic, whether it's in Africa or Southeast Asia, wherever it may be, America, of course, even Latin America, even in the Asian countries. It's fantastic. How important has this technology shift into sort of social been to change people's minds about the animals and like I say, to be a champion for the animals?
Well, it's a great question. I think social media allows people to focus on negativity a lot of times. And that's something that we are up against. There's a lot of cultural beliefs that are really not very accurate. And so what we try to do with social media is to tell, the good stories and to give people hope. And I think that's important, especially for the younger generation. A lot of times I get answers like, well, how do you remain positive about what it is that you do? And being able to tell the stories on social media, and showing, and you mentioned Asia, and I just want to comment on that because a lot of times people say, well, people in Asia have very negative views of animal welfare. But that's not entirely true. And so, we have a big office in China, and we have incredible staff, and we have incredible young people who do amazing work to save the lives of all sorts of animals. And so, I'm on the Jane Goodall Council of Hope Foundation. And one of the things that we focus there is really saying you have to have hope, with climate change and the wildfires and floods and wars. If you don't have hope, people are giving up. And oftentimes younger people are saying, well, it's too late. We've passed that tipping point. And so I always fight against that. And I think social media is a great way to be able to tell the story and to be for something as opposed to being against something.
See, I love that, to be for something instead of being against something. That's so powerful. When I look at sort of animal welfare, sometimes you look at it and it's sort of a dark space. There's some things that are happening that it sends a chill up your spine. But what you do at IFAW, Azzedine, is you light a match, and then that match lights another match, and then the matches keep lighting, and this dark room becomes filled with light, and all of a sudden this big light room becomes something that you can be for. And I love that sort of positioning, sort of statement that you have there. Let's talk about your team, because like you said, you've got a great team. You have teams all over the world. They're doing such great work. How important is the team to the success of IFAW since 1969?
So it's absolutely critical. Short answer. The reason why it's so critical and how we approach the people that we hire is based on a cross-cultural learning that I've had, for a long time from my days at Peace Corps, is that we're not an organization that is imposing beliefs from the West or from a different culture or from a different religion. What we're trying to do is tap into the traditional knowledges and the cultural beliefs of the places where we work. And so, in Kenya, the staff is from Kenya. In China, the staff is from China. In the Middle East, the staff is from the Middle East. So that's true of every single office where we work. And so we have incredible diversity within the organization. We have language abilities. We have good understanding of what it takes to work in some very, very difficult places. And so we're unique in that way. And one of the things I like to say when I travel and meet with people is, I'm not arriving with a plan in my back pocket to impose on you. I'm arriving with a mirror to try to reflect what it is that you yourselves are trying to do. And without the support of the people that we have on staff, but also the people that we work with, we're not going to succeed.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Of course, I think about it. I think about your team, and then I think about the younger generation. We've got a multitude of generations living on this earth right now, and the youngest ones coming up, I mean, the ones that are, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I mean, I'm talking about the super young ones. What do we do? How do we effectuate their minds so that they have this appreciation for animals, so that they ultimately can become a champion for animals as well, instead of sort of, finding things on social that is very disturbing and watching all that bad stuff? How do we get them to change into a positive member of the champion for animal community?
Yeah. I think children have a natural affinity towards animals. They're curious. And just in my own personal life and how I raise my own children, and now I have a young grandchild, I treat them as incredibly intelligent beings. And this notion that you should shield children from certain things, like what we're talking about, I think it is wrong. I mean, they have a natural affinity. They want to protect, and the concern that I have is really what younger people are expressing about anxiety and the inability and the helplessness that they express. So what we've found, in engaging young people with art and music, in giving them ways to express themselves in areas where it's often too negative. People say, well, the earth is burning, it's flooding. All of these things are true. But we've seen some incredible art, and we do this with the United Nations. And every year we give an award to people in all sorts of age groups. But the art that comes from children who are 8 years old, 10 years old, 13 years old is absolutely extraordinary. And to not treat the children as beings that can't understand what it is that you're saying, I think is just wrong. And sometimes it's not language; it's giving them an opportunity to express themselves, through music or art or dance. So I'm always thinking, what are the creative ways to create a movement beyond what IFAW is? I mean, IFAW is one organization, but how do we create a movement of people that actually have a platform to speak to some of these incredibly complex issues?
Yeah, so interesting. Art and music can lead into this look and this passion into other areas, including animals. And I love that movement that you talk about, Azzedine. It's really important. You've done a great movement, of course, with your organization and also with some of the organizations that you've surrounded yourself with. When I think about an organization like yours, I think about the end user in this case, the people or animals that you serve. This would be the animals. You think about the employees, but you think also about the people that support the organization. Let's talk about the supporters, because you have a great board of directors. The supporters are far and wide. Let's give a shout out to the people organizing the fundraising and the people that are actually giving the money to make a difference for the animals' lives and welfare.
Yeah, so we work around the world. We raise funds in many countries in Europe and the United States, North America. And people give for all sorts of different reasons. And what I've learned over the years is that sometimes organizations, and it's true, I think, of all nonprofits and probably companies too, we spend too much time speaking to ourselves. I don't have to convince you to like animals, right? And so I'm always trying to think of, well, how do we work with the unusual suspects? Let's round up the unusual suspects. And that's why I think reaching out to supporters who give, and some people give small amounts, but to them it's an incredible description of how they feel about animals in the world, all the way up to institutions, and we get government funding to do some of the larger conservation work. But people who are giving small amounts are making an incredible contribution, oftentimes much more of a sacrifice than people who have more financial resources. So I'm always focused on making sure that we are honest, that we're transparent, that we fulfill our promises. And I was just on a call with the staff, and the fundraising staff this morning, and I said, the first thing that we always have to do is first do the right thing. And if we make a promise, we're going to keep it, no matter how difficult it is. And when we fail, we should just be honest about saying, listen, we did the best we could. We couldn't do everything we wanted. But we couldn't do the work that we do without the support of people around the world.
Yeah, and that's great advice for entrepreneurs watching the show. Rewind what Azzedine just said, because that also works in a for-profit business or any business, a startup business, a Fortune 100 business. Do the right thing, deliver on your promises. And if you can't deliver, step up and say, hey, we couldn't deliver, but let's do something else, or we're going to do something else for you to make this right. And I love that so much. Let's talk about a connection, because I've been very blessed and fortunate to have been around the world and have actually seen animals in their natural habitat. Is there any connection between people that want to provide funding for this type of an opportunity and whether they've actually seen animals in their natural habitat, or is that connection not even necessary? It's just people's love of animals that makes them a great giver for the organization?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. I would say that most people have a connection of some sort. Oftentimes it's their pet. They don't necessarily make the connection to some of the conservation issues or the climate change issues that we work on. And so that's why when I talk about, saving the life of an individual animal, it's really about the wildlife, is that you can save that animal, but if they don't have a place to live, they're going to wind up in probably a worse situation. And so the interesting thing about people who aren't able to go out and see wildlife in the wild, in their natural habitat, is interesting, because then you get to talk about zoos and is there a connection with people? Well, I saw an animal in a zoo or a circus, or some of the things that we don't like to see animals taken out of the wild to put into those situations. For some people, it's the only time they'll ever see an animal. But I think with the advent of social media that you brought up, and some of the extraordinary films that are on television, with David Attenborough and others, you can experience things that you'd never experience otherwise. And I'm blessed. I'm blessed like you. I mean, I get to see them. But the other thing that I've learned is like, oh, well, I'll just switch on the television. I'll watch this show for an hour. Those films take years to produce. And so it's a great question, because I talk about this a lot. And, how do we allow people an opportunity to experience something that they never will experience? And I think we have to be honest about that. Sometimes you hear, oh, well, people should go to Africa, and they should. Well, I mean, come on. How many people can actually do it? It's an extraordinary experience. But again, through art, through music, through reaching out to people outside of the conservation world so that they can tell the story, I think that's the way to make that connection.
Yeah, I love it. You're all about the connection. Of course, I want to talk about your book in just a minute. I know that's really exciting. But before I do, I look at you as a forward thinker, a zeitgeist, someone that, thinks about the future. Let's talk about it, because are there things that are on the table or things that are keeping you up late at night where you're saying to yourself, wow, this part of the animal welfare sort of tranche is something that, needs some future focus. We're more worried about it than some of the other things. What are some of the areas where you're seeing in the future we really have to sort of start paying more attention for the animals?
Well, the good news is we learned something, particularly in the pandemic with COVID. Nature will bounce back quickly. It will. I was talking to colleagues in Kenya, in Nairobi. They said that because everything was shut down, people weren't driving around. The air in Nairobi cleared in 3 days. 3 days it cleared. And they saw Kilimanjaro for the first time in 50 years, right? So that gives you hope. I think one of the things that I really focus on, and I've been focusing on it with discussions I've had with President Ruto from Kenya and President of Malawi, is that wildlife is not just the victim of climate change. It's part of the solution. And there's lots of studies that are coming out, and Yale University just has a new study out showing how wildlife can actually help us save the planet. So I say things like, save an elephant, save ourselves, save a whale, save ourselves, save a beaver, save ourselves. I mean, there's some incredible things that animals can do, and the animals themselves and their value. When we talk about intrinsic value of individuals, that value is not part of negotiations for climate change or loss and damage funds or even the economy. It's not. And what I hear people say, which I find extraordinary, is, well, we'll save nature if it makes good business sense or it's a good economic decision. And to me, it sounds like, well, we'll decide to breathe air if it makes economic sense. Well, it does. And so I think people are beginning to wake up to some of the value of biodiversity and living, and that's why we focus on animals and people thriving together. You cannot just focus on the animals because it's the people problems that have put the animals into danger. So where we really focus, and what does keep me up at night, and I hope I'm making some progress there, is to value what has not yet been lost. The economics of climate change and carbon and all of these things that we talk about is always focused on what has already been lost. It's the restoration of what has been lost. But where is the funding to prevent the loss of nature? And that's what I focus on. But I remain hopeful because I see that if we do make the right decision, then nature will help us survive.
Yeah, let's remain hopeful. I love that nature will help us survive. I mean, that's such a different dynamic, a different way to look at it, something different than I've ever heard before. But that just makes all the sense in the world to me. It resonates for me, and I'm sure it's going to resonate for the people watching this show, Azzedine. Very exciting news. You have a book. It's really based on your life. It's somewhat of a memoir, but it really focuses on not only your passion, but also the way in which you think and the way in which you have sort of progressed in your life to this point of, being a leader in the field. Let's talk about the book. Let's tell the people where they can get it, and tell us just a little bit about it, because I think memoirs are always fascinating coming from someone from the top.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah. So it's called the Couscous Chronicles, and couscous is, of course, a food. And many people said, "Well, is that just a salad?" I said, "Well, it's not a salad. It's a major dish that we have in North Africa every Friday." And so, after years of people telling me, "Well, you really have to write a book," I decided to sit down during the pandemic. I had more time. The book is available everywhere. You can go into any bookstore and find it. Go online, Goodreads or Amazon. Support your local bookstore. You can find it everywhere. But one of the themes in the book, and I use a lot of humor, and that is what gets me through some of the very difficult times that I've had, including, living in very violent places, Jerusalem and West Bank and Gaza, where my children suffered from kidnapping attempts and things like that. So it's not all funny stories, but one of the underlying themes is this notion that people want to kind of put you into a box. And when they ask you, well, why is your name Azzedine? Or why do you have blue eyes? Or, why do you speak Arabic? Why do you do all of these things? If you don't fit into their box, I have found, which I still find extraordinary, people they're more willing to accept a made up story than they are the truth. And this really affects me in the work that I do, is that too many people assume that you're not truthful and that you're not fitting a paradigm. And so I use that to say, well, that's correct, but that's your problem. It's not my problem. And someone said, which I put in the book, it's like, you're a very confused person. I said, I'm not a confused person. I may be confusing to you, but I'm not a confused person. I know exactly where I stand. And so it's a series of stories that start out in Morocco, and then our time in Yemen, in Bulgaria, and of course, Jerusalem. And the story of the girl from Tangiers, who is my wife. We had an arranged marriage, and we've been married for 35 years. So something must have worked. So that's what the story is about.
It definitely worked. I love it. Couscous Chronicles. It's a great name. Let's talk about it from the perspective of leading from the top. Generally speaking, for entrepreneurs watching this show, I would imagine you're a person that, you mentioned you had a Zoom call with the people this morning on the team. I would imagine it's so ingrained in you as a dean that leadership has to happen in a way that people who are part of the team can look at the leader and they say to themselves, well, that person's leading from the top. That person is actually walking the walk and talking the talk. Like you said, you want to get things done. You want to produce. You want to get from point A to Z, but sometimes it doesn't go that way. Be honest about that with your customers. How important do you feel the leadership position is for any organization? And can you give some tips to people that are trying to become leaders about what they need to do as a leader to be the best leader they can do or be?
I think it's a lot about courage. And so a lot of times when you talk about businesses, there's so much activity level time that is spent on, what did we do today, or what should we do, or what strategy should we put in place, or what, revenue generating. But ultimately, I think leadership really is about being courageous, to admit that something's not going to work, but we're going to do it anyway. And in our work, and I think that I think it applies to business too, because in today's world, why do people associate with the brand? Because you're honest and you're transparent and I think courageous. You have to just say, first and foremost, I'm going to do the right thing. Even if it's not good for the bottom line, I think ultimately people come around to saying, well, I could rely on this person for truthful information. And this is what we talk about at IFAW. We were talking about it this morning. It's like, first and foremost, let's be a source of honest, reliable information. And if you can do that as a leader, you're going to make progress and you're going to be creative, and the organization, I think, will thrive.
Yeah, I love it. I know I'm keeping you a little bit over, and thank you so much. I want to indulge myself with a couple more questions. People watching the show, they heard you say as a dean that you meet quite often, I would imagine, with world leaders, people that are running countries. And a lot of people in the entrepreneurial world, we're not meeting with leaders of countries. So people are hearing that and they might be saying to themselves, what is that like? What's that responsibility feel like? What types of people become leaders of countries? And what is it maybe in meeting with them that you can share with the audience that either might surprise the audience or something that the audience might say, aha, that makes a lot of sense, why they are the leader of a country?
Yeah. Well, I think you should surprise yourself too. If you want to meet with the presidents and world leaders, don't go with pat, answers and questions. Is that if you are going to be a source of trusted information and become an advisor, even if that's not your role, you have to be able to embarrass yourself by putting yourself out there. And so, the thing that I find most interesting and intriguing about world leaders that I do meet with is that if they are listening, if they're a good listener, and I think this is critically important for leadership in business as well. If you are a listener, and the presidents that I've met and kings and princes that I've met who are good listeners, that's why they get to where they are. Sometimes it's just protocol. You meet with someone, you shake the hand, you do the photo. But if you're willing to put yourself out there, and you might get kicked out of the room too, but what's the worst thing that you can, that's going to happen? You might not get another meeting, but they might remember you. I mean, I had a conversation with President Bill Clinton one time, and we were chit-chatting behind the curtain at the stage, and he was saying something, and I kept saying, "Oh, that's interesting. You know, we could do this, we could do that." And I got some feedback afterwards. He says, "I don't know who this guy is," but he kept interrupting me. I really liked that.
Yeah, that's so funny. We've heard the stories about Clinton, who has a lock brain where he meets somebody, and then even a year or two later, he can remember what the conversation was prior.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really amazing. I just love it so much. And of course, you mentioned, these world leaders, they're great listeners. And of course, according to my wife, sometimes, because I don't listen, I'm never going to be a great world leader, I think. But listen, this has been so much fun, Azzedine, to have you on the show. Before I let you go, I need to talk about entrepreneurship. For the younger entrepreneurs watching the show, let's give a little feedback. Maybe they're hitting a tough time. Maybe they're hitting a roadblock, or they freeze in the frame a little bit. What advice can you give them? Maybe even advice that you mentioned in the Couscous Chronicles about what it takes to keep on pushing and keep on going.
It's a really interesting question. And I had a conversation in Kenya with a young entrepreneur who told me that he felt as though he was hitting a roadblock and a ceiling. And so he turned to the metaverse. I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, it's just, you can do anything you want there." And I said, "Please don't ever give up like that. Don't ever give up like that." He asked me later about perseverance. And I think this is the thing for entrepreneurs, is that it is difficult, and there are times that you need for reflection and to give yourself time. And I tell myself this all the time too, because I'm not sure I'm that good at it anymore, is that you have to persevere, and you do have to believe in yourself, that you live in this moment too, and it gets very philosophical, and you can always think back. And that's what gives you, a sadness and a depression, and looking forward too much can cause too much anxiety. So you live in the moment of what it is that you're trying to do and believe in yourself. I was never afraid that I wasn't going to get another job, or that I wouldn't be able to take care of my children, or that I wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. I never thought that. And it could have been true. It could have been true. But I never thought that that's what's going to stop me from trying to do something good.
Yeah, I love that. You look into the rear view mirror too much, you have a problem. You look out the windshield too far into the future, you start getting a little freaked out, a little stressed, a little anxious. Right. So stay right in the moment. I love that. That's fantastic. That's going to be the next book, I think.
All right.
Azzedine, I love it so much. I'm real honored to have you on the show, and I'm going to bring you back. We want to talk much more about being a champion for animals worldwide, and all the great things you're doing, the wonderful events that you have, the great fundraisers, the incredible awards that you offer, and of course, the great work that you and your team are doing. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the .com Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Thanks, Andy. I really appreciate it.